Hello, everyone. Welcome to Impact Over Image. And today I'm excited to be able to share about a particular topic that really holds dear to my heart. So, this topic is about the idea of literacy, meaning the ability to read, to understand text, and to use the text and interpret it however you wish. There have been certain segments and lies that have been taught for the longest time. I've heard such words like if you're trying to hide something from a black man or a black individual, simply put it in a book. Meaning that there's been an idea and ideology that has been passed on for a very long time, advertising the lack of reading and leisure seeking as something that black people gravitate towards. But deeply embedded in this falsehood is the idea of control. And that control came about when different influences came into different societies and also different sections to be able to change the narratives. Case in point, I am going to say the fact state that in many, many African countries, there were forms of writing. Even in caves, there were writing that dates back thousands and thousands of years where people would pictorially write something in order for them to be able to pass on a message. In different caves in many different African countries, there have been some sort of archaeological findings that people were actually literary. They would actually write things down. Now, fast forward again, not even in the future, so to speak, prior to other different cultures coming into Africa, there was many people held private libraries prior to European visits, if you want to call it as that, or invasions, if you want to call it as that, however you wish to translate that. Timbuktu was a library in West Africa in today's country known as Mali. It had more than 700,000 manuscripts within that library. And that library didn't have a touch point of external reference as a way of writing. Everything was written from science, philosophy, religion. The library contained all those subjects, if you will. Now the question comes into play. Libraries were on the continent, they were in Africa. People read. And how would you write more than 700,000, upward of 500,000 manuscripts? That's what they were just able to find. What about those that were not found through archaeology? It is possibly more, possibly in the millions. That tells us that we've always been a literary people, but something shifted in the cultural setting. That's where now we kind of lean towards the idea of storytelling to say messages were not to be recorded. They were supposed to be passed on down using oral means. You would maybe selectively find an elder in your community, and then that elder would pass on the information without writing. They would just store it in their brains and pass it on, called oral tradition. So then that became an acceptable norm, so to speak, because some things changed in the land. But prior to different configurations, the writings have always been there, and also the idea of storing books was always there, even prior to having different invasions or different cultural changes. Now, many a times we've been told history is written by the winners, right? So whoever won began to change and alter the culture slowly by slowly, inch by inch, until some things were certainly changed in the land. Now, case in point, let me get back to this. We are now in an age where also consuming media is taking more precedence over producing media. So, in a way, what we need to be able to do, just encouragingly, everyone else in this world should become a person who leaves some sort of writing behind, because the writings are the medium of passing on information formally and informally to those that are going to come after us. Today, there's no excuse for us not to be writers. Let's not just be readers, but also let's do all that we can to push out the idea that writing is not part of our culture. In every culture, there has always been a form of writing that has been set in place. Another historical account I want to share is about another African who leaned towards the Greek side of the house. His name was Aesop. Aesop, I mean, he actually composed fables that have lasted hundreds and hundreds of years, the Aesop fables. And some of those who haven't quite read any of them, there are so many of them, the fox and the hare, and also the tortoise and the hare, the one who wrote the golden geese. So, in a way, we need to be able to understand that for hundreds of years, actually, Africans have been writers. So this message applies to everyone, but specifically, I want to be able to push this notion of actually admitting and accepting that we are not readers. On the contrary, we are supposed to be readers because our ancestors also were readers and they wrote. It's just that most of the things actually were diffused because other cultures were competing with the other culture, and then the stronger culture kind of took hold, and then we started leaning towards the ability not to love literacy, so to speak. With that said, that's just what I wanted to share. That when you've been told a lie long enough, you will start to begin some of these stereotypical messaging saying, well, I am not supposed to read because we're coming from a culture of non readers. On the contrary, that is a falsehood that we've actually embraced and have begun to believe, and then we've pushed it further, and then we accept it, and then being passive, we've made it as if it's the standard of truth that we are not readers, but rather would rather have someone read for us and we're just consumers. With that said, that's just one of the historical myths that I wanted to debunk. That we've always had libraries in Egypt, in Kemet, in West Africa, in Ghana, in Southern Africa, in different caves. The writings were there where people dwelt. Many, many writings have populated there all over Africa. If you look and if you go into deeper archaeology, you will find that there were writings that were set that date back centuries and centuries ago. So, with that said, come on now. Let's not accept nowadays that we can pick up a book and for us to be able to learn for ourselves. But not only that, I just don't want us to be consumers of information and knowledge. We also need to begin to produce by writing our thoughts down rather than just maybe even speaking, or rather than just as an idea of consuming knowledge. With that said, that's just what I wanted to share without actually shaming anybody. I just wanted to highlight the fact that we've always been readers on the continent. It is part of our DNA to be able to read. And some of the messagings were lost because the other culture came in and started to weed out other people to be able to have independent thought. With that said, why would some slaves be taught not to read? Because I think an escape to even more than mental enslavement is actually literacy and reading. That's the word of the day and the caution I just wanted to share. Hopefully, you have a good day and welcome to Impact Over Image. Bye bye.